কাছে কিংবা দূরে আপনারা যে যেখানে আছেন আপনাদের সবাইকে স্বাগত জানাচ্ছি। আমি সুলতানা রহমান, দেখছেন বাংলা নিউজ নেটওয়ার্ক। আজকে আমি এমন একজনকে আমার অতিথি বানিয়েছি। আমি আগেই একটা পোস্ট দিয়েছিলাম, আপনারা নিশ্চয়ই দেখেছেন। তার নাম মাইকেল রুবিন। আপনারা জানেন তিনি বাংলাদেশ এবং আমাদের সাবকন্টিনেন্ট, মিডল ইস্ট, এই সব এলাকাগুলোতে তিনি আমেরিকান ফরেন পলিসি সংক্রান্ত বিষয়ে খুবই বিশেষজ্ঞ। তাকে বলা হয় যে তিনি আমেরিকান ফরেন পলিসির বিশ্লেষক। তিনি বর্তমানে কর্মরত আছেন, সিনিয়র ফেলো তিনি ফরেন অ্যান্ড ডিফেন্স পলিসি। এর আগে তিনি পেন্টাগনের অ্যাডভাইজার হিসেবে কাজ করেছেন। ফলে বিভিন্ন সময়ে তিনি বাংলাদেশ ইস্যুতে সম্প্রতি সময়ে আমরা দেখছি তিনি কথা বলছেন। মাত্র গত সপ্তাহে মানে নির্বাচনের 4-5 দিন আগে তিনি একটা প্রজেকশন দিয়েছিলেন, মানে একটা ভবিষ্যৎবাণী করেছিলেন বিভিন্ন তথ্য উপাত্তের ভিত্তিতে যে আগামী এই নির্বাচনে, আগামী বলতে 12ই ফেব্রুয়ারি নির্বাচনে জামায়াতে ইসলামী বিজয়ী হতে পারে, এমন একটি ফোরকাস্ট তিনি করেছিলেন। তিনি কেন করেছিলেন এবং তার ফোরকাস্ট কেন বাস্তবায়ন হয়নি, এই বিষয়টি নিয়ে আজকে কথা বলবো। সেই সঙ্গে আপনারা জানেন যে আমাদের মানে বাংলাদেশের বর্তমান যে রাজনৈতিক পরিস্থিতি, এই ক্ষেত্রে ভারত বাংলাদেশ সম্পর্ক, আমেরিকা বাংলাদেশ সম্পর্ক অত্যন্ত গুরুত্বপূর্ণ। সেই সঙ্গে তারেক রহমানের এই বিজয়ী হয়ে আসা আওয়ামী লীগকে তারা প্রত্যাবর্তন করাতে সাহায্য করবে কিনা, সবকিছু মিলিয়ে মানুষের মনে অনেক প্রশ্ন আছে। এই প্রশ্নগুলি আমি আজকে তার কাছ থেকে জানার চেষ্টা করব। আমি তাকে প্রথমে আমার এখানে স্বাগত জানাতে চাই। ওয়েলকাম মিস্টার মাইকেল রুবিন, it's great to have you in my show.
Thank you for having me, Sultana.
Michael, last week I met you in DC and you had a projection on Bangladesh election. You predicted, according to your projection, Jamaat Islami is going to win in the election, but it didn't happen. So what was the reason behind your projection, and why it didn't came out?
Well, let me put it this way. I mean, certainly the BNP won, but the fact that Jamaati is now the voice of the opposition, what I'm trying to say is not that they're going to be the prime minister. They're not, obviously, but they have been empowered beyond their electoral mandate by the actions of Muhammad Yunus and this interregnum after the coup against Sheikh Hasina. That's what I'm trying to drive at. And their voice is simply being amplified in a way that should not occur if we had free and fair elections with the Awami League also participating.
Good observation. But did you surprised? I mean, are you surprised the outcome of the election?
Look, I'm pleasantly surprised at the degree by which the BNP won. And certainly Tariq Rahman has a mandate, although a mandate with an asterisk over it because of the banning of the Awami League. That said, what we see is a repudiation of the generation, the newer generation of Bangladeshis who are basically exposing what we've seen with regard to these student protests as something which they don't want to embrace. They don't want to be East Pakistan. They are Bangladeshi nationalists, and that may be a surprise in Islamabad, which was sponsoring Jamaati Islami, which was sponsoring the protests back in July and August of 2024, and was sponsoring the National Citizens Party.
Okay. You mentioned your earlier answer that there was a coup against Sheikh Hasina government. I mean, many people doesn't believe it.
Well, I mean, they may not believe it, but look, there's the first draft of history, which a number of journalists seized upon. They believed the press releases. But what we know from the forensic evidence is that a lot of the munitions, the ammunition, which had been fired into the crowd wasn't ammunition which the Bangladeshi police had access to. It was something which Bangladeshi military, the army had access to, but the army was seen standing down, and it was ammunition which some of the militant groups had access to. So it actually looks like we had agents provocateurs. We had people firing into the crowds in order to create outrage. But what we also see is that the protests that occurred in July and August 2024 were not organic. They were pre-planned, and they were pre-planned in Pakistan.
Wow. What are those evidence? What are those You mentioned about the weapons, the ammunition, but I mean, what is your findings?
Well, what we now know is not only from the forensics, but we also have a lot of whistleblowers who were inside the Pakistani security services at the time and still are inside the Pakistani security services, who were getting increasingly concerned. They may have had objections with regard to how Sheikh Hasina had handled some of the quota issues and some of the issues relating to students. But once Muhammad Yunus came into power and started opening the prisons and allowing out all the militants, all the extremists, after you started having the lynchings of minorities inside Bangladesh, a lot of the people who had been silent on the margins suddenly started passing messages, passing documents, and showing in a way where I think many people now understand that what happened in July and August 2024 wasn't as it was initially reported and wasn't as the narrative that Muhammad Yunus put forward. That narrative wasn't accurate.
Wow. Many Bangladeshi people believed that Dr. Yunus was planted by USA. I'm sorry, directly I'm telling that. Even former Ambassador Peter Hush, he was one of the key role player behind those. There are so many allegations. What do you think about those?
Honestly, I don't think the United States is fully capable of this. What I blame the United States for is naivete. I mean, certainly Muhammad Yunus was embraced by the Clinton Foundation. He has a narrative, he has a reputation in the United States, in Washington, which is incongruent to the reality. People don't understand how venal he can be. People don't understand the corruption cases against him. They don't understand the antagonism which he had towards the Awami League, the personal rivalry which he had with Sheikh Hasina. They didn't fully understand his motivations. That said, the American embassy in Dhaka isn't very strong. It isn't very big. And the problem with conspiracies is, in the way the United States government works, hundreds of people would have to be involved, and there's no way you're going to get hundreds of people being quiet. So in this case, that's just a conspiracy. That doesn't excuse American incompetence, but the Americans weren't being proactive here. We were being reactive in the wrong way.
Okay. Do you think Trump administration will be a little cooperative, or they're gonna reach out to the Awami League leader?
Well, I would hope they do. I mean, I put it this way. First of all, I don't fully trust the American embassy in Dhaka because, look, I hate to say this, Bangladesh isn't often on the front burner of American foreign policy. It doesn't often come to the desk of the Secretary of State. And therefore, too often, the Bangladesh policy is left to the embassy. And we saw, for example, from leaks where the American political officer was reaching out to Jamaati Islami, we saw how, absent direction from above, how the American policy could go awry. By the way, I would advise that Tariq Rahman should declare that American political officer persona non grata, that they should be escorted to the airport and told to leave the country. But when it comes to the US government and to the State Department, they congratulated Bangladesh on the elections, but at the same time, we now need to push for the Awami League to be unbanned, because while Tariq Rahman won a decisive victory, again, so long as the most popular or one of the most popular political parties is banned, ultimately, he's not going to enjoy the full legitimacy which any Bangladeshi leader deserves.
Yeah. Do you think Trump administration get the picture clearly the way you explained here?
I don't think that the people at the top of the Trump administration are fully focusing on this, just because they're consumed, as you're aware, with what's going on in Venezuela, what's going on in Iran, and what's going on in Russia and Ukraine. That said, Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State and the acting National Security Advisor, is a very smart man, and I think that his instincts are generally tend to be correct. That said, I mean, there needs to be a lot more concerted attention. For example, under Muhammad Yunus, you had dozens of journalists arrested, some accused of murder. It's absolutely ridiculous. You had hundreds of professors and teachers dismissed from their posting. I mean, ultimately, what the next administration, what Tariq Rahman needs to do, and what the United States should be pressuring him to do, would be to return these people to their positions and to actually to prosecute those who were guilty of murder, not journalists who criticize Muhammad Yunus, but rather those that were involved in the murder of Hindus, of Christians, and of Muslims who opposed Muhammad Yunus. Muhammad Yunus should be facing charges right now for corruption, but also based on the precedent which he himself set, Muhammad Yunus should be facing charges for murder as well.
Do you think who gonna do that? I mean, now Prime Minister-elect Tariq Rahman is going to do that?
Well, Sultana, obviously Tariq Rahman doesn't want to do that, but that's why the United States has Magnitsky Act sanctions. And the fact of the matter is, while the Bangladeshi government can't go after Muhammad Yunus so quickly, given if Muhammad Yunus is judged on his actions rather than the imagery which is put forth by George Soros or the Bill Clinton Foundation, then he would be, a subject for sanctions. And ultimately, the advantage of Tariq Rahman and the BNP winning the election is that they now have a mandate to expose what happened over the last 18 months. You can be certain, Sultana, that Jamaati Islami would never expose anything which happened. But the BNP, I would actually argue that this is their first hurdle. They either need to uncover all the illegality which occurred under Muhammad Yunus, or they themselves are going to lose their legitimacy very, very quickly.
Wow, many of them, those who were involved in those process last 18 months, I heard that many of them are fleeing, and interestingly, many are fleeing in USA. What do you think?
I think that wouldn't surprise me. And of course, the United States, because we have a separation of mosque and state, of church and state in the United States, we as policymakers have always been very, very naive about religion. And so we don't understand, for example, that Islamists will use the rhetoric of democracy without actually embracing democracy itself. So, for example, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the president of Turkey, famously said that democracy is like a streetcar or a tram. You ride it as far as you need, and then you step off. Likewise, you have lots of Democrats, lots of Islamists who are willing to pretend that they are Democrats. They're willing to go to elections so long as they win the elections. But if they don't win the elections, then they are going to try to win through bullets and bombs what they can't win through the ballot. And this is why it's so dangerous that Muhammad Yunus let out all these extremists who were guilty of extreme violence inside Bangladesh. That's something which Tariq Rahman is also going to have to worry about as he tries to return Bangladesh to security. But the United States should not be allowing these people in the country if they are members of extremist groups or terror-tied groups.
Yeah, I have three more questions to you.
Yeah.
Number one, they have a yes no vote, I mean, referendum, and they want to change the basic foundation of the country. Do you think they can do that?
Well, I mean, we've been in this situation before with Algeria back in 1991 and 1992. And of course, the efforts to have a fundamental change to the constitution is what led in part to the civil war in Algeria. At the time, there was an American Assistant Secretary of State named Edward Dirigian who explained the US position this way: I am in favor of one man, one vote. I am not in favor of one man, one vote, one time. And if that's what Jamaat Islami or others are trying to do in Bangladesh, that ultimately is going to lead to violence, because you can't have legitimacy if you're trying to smother a major constituency. And make no mistake, the Awami League was either the majority party or the plurality party, and its big tent, more secular liberal approach is something which appeals to most Bangladeshis, especially after what they suffered in the 1971 genocide and what Pakistan had imposed upon them back at that time. So to try to smother out the voice of the Awami League is absolutely crazy.
Hmm, good. But another thing, do you see that any reconciliation between Awami League and BNP?
I would put it this way: if Tariq Rahman is wise, there would be a reconciliation. Look, let's face it, there were lots of issues within the Awami League, and Sheikh Hasina wasn't beyond reproach. One thing I wish that the Awami League had done better was cultivate that new generation, that next heir apparent. And this is something which the Awami League could be doing now. But Tariq Rahman really needs to unban the Awami League, because he needs a serious opposition to keep him honest.
One of my viewer, she is requesting you, will Michael Rubin help us to reach out to Rubio, Secretary of State, and President Trump?
Um, Look, I'm not a lobbyist, and because I work at a nonprofit, by American law, I'm not allowed to lobby. So, nor is it my job to do this. It's the job of the Bangladeshi American community to do this. And so the Bangladeshi American community needs to reach out to their congressmen and senators, regardless of the party. They need to write for newspapers, for blogs, and so forth, to keep this at the forefront of American public attention.
Yeah. Michael Rubio, Michael Rubin, you know what? Former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, and now she is in Delhi, you know that, right? So, I mean, when she can come back to the country, many Awami League leaders right now, they are exiled in India. So, do you think they should come back soon, and Tariq Rahman should take action or initiative to get them back home? If any of them are corrupt, anything, if any of them have any problem, I mean issue, they can go by the law. What do you think?
Well, look, I think that all Bangladeshis should be equal under the law. I do think that that Tariq Rahman needs to unban the Awami League, so that they can organize, so that they can re-enter the political process. It would make sense for Tariq Rahman to solicit advice from time to time from Sheikh Hasina, because after all, she has decades of experience. And if he is seen generously reaching out to her, it's only going to broaden his appeal and his base. So I do think this is wise. At the same time, the capital crimes, the death penalty, and so forth, which Muhammad Yunus tried to impose on Sheikh Hasina, I mean, this was a lot of projection on Muhammad Yunus's part, because he knew that he personally was guilty of what he was accusing Sheikh Hasina of. And therefore, if anyone is to leave the country or face justice, it would be Muhammad Yunus.
Yeah, and another my another viewer asked you a question. Michael Rubin should know that the The actual voter turnout was not more than 20%. I think you know that, right?
Well, I mean, what I've been doing is reading the reports of some of the election monitors, and they used a slightly higher figure, but the persistence of the lower figure is one of the reasons why I suggest that you're not going to have full legitimacy if you're Tariq Rahman until you unban the Awami League. That even though he won decisively, it's like having an election where 75% of the people aren't able to vote for their choice. And therefore, this election is tainted from the very beginning because of the banning of the Awami League.
Yeah, there is another question. I think this is the last question. That is, someone urge appeal to you that please help save the lives of minorities in Bangladesh. You know, they are really under threat.
Well, absolutely. And this is something which the Americans need to know. This is something which Secretary of State Rubio, or the writer was, I believe, in Canada, the Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney, would certainly react to if they knew what was going on to the minorities. And this is also why we need to return the terrorists who Muhammad Yunus sprang from prison back to jail. But when it comes to legitimacy, just let me put this in the American context. I happen to be a Republican, but the last thing I would want would be for the Democratic Party to be banned. And the fact of the matter is, if you had an election and only Republicans or Republicans in minor third parties were allowed to run, it wouldn't be a real election in the United States. And it's the same thing when it comes to Bangladesh. You can have elections with the BNP, Jamaati Islami, but it's not a real election unless you have the Awami League, the party of the founder of Bangladesh running.
Yep. Michael Rubin, thank you so much for joining with me and giving your time. I know you are a very busy person. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
দর্শক, আমি আপনাদেরকে একটু সংক্ষেপে এখানে একজন অনুরোধ করেছেন যে আমি আপনাদেরকে একটু বাংলায় যেন জিনিসটি ব্রিফ করি। এতক্ষণ আমরা কথা বলছিলাম মাইকেল রুবিন। তিনি একটি নন প্রফিট অর্গানাইজেশনে কাজ করেন। তিনি একজন বাংলাদেশ, ইন্ডিয়া, পুরো সাবকন্টিনেন্ট, মিডল ইস্ট এইসব বিষয় নিয়ে মূলত তার খুব গভীর পড়ালেখা যেমন আছে, তিনি পেন্টাগনে একজন বিশেষজ্ঞ হিসেবে, অ্যাডভাইজার হিসেবে কাজ করতেন। এর বাইরে তিনি বর্তমানে সিনিয়র ফেলো ফরেন অ্যান্ড ডিফেন্স পলিসি নিয়ে কাজ করছেন। তিনি সেখানকার ফরেন কি বলে এটাকে, সিনিয়র ফেলো। এর বাইরে তিনি কোনো লবিস্ট নন কিন্তু, এবং তিনি বিভিন্ন সময়ে বাংলাদেশের উপরে তাদের পর্যবেক্ষণ দিয়ে এসেছেন। ফলে সবকিছু মিলিয়ে তিনি যেটি বলতে চেয়েছেন, ডক্টর ইউনূসের বিচার হওয়া উচিত। গত 18 মাসে বাংলাদেশে যা কিছু ঘটেছে, এই জন্য ডক্টর ইউনূস এর পেছনে সবকিছুর সঙ্গে তিনি সংশ্লিষ্ট, এবং বাংলাদেশে শেখ হাসিনার বিরুদ্ধে একটি কু হয়েছে, যেই কুয়ের সঙ্গে পাকিস্তান সংশ্লিষ্ট বলে মাইকেল রুবিন সেই অভিযোগটি তিনি কিন্তু এখানে করেছেন। সেই সঙ্গে তিনি আরো বলেছেন যে ভবিষ্যতে যে প্রাইম মিনিস্টার হতে যাচ্ছেন তারেক রহমান, তার উচিত হবে খুব দ্রুত আওয়ামী লীগকে আনব্যান করা বা আওয়ামী লীগের কার্যক্রমের উপর যে নিষেধাজ্ঞা রয়েছে সেটিকে বাতিল করা, এমনকি আওয়ামী লীগকে যাতে করে রাজনীতি ফিরতে পারে সেই পথ প্রশস্ত করা, শেখ হাসিনা যেন দেশে ফিরতে পারেন সেই ব্যবস্থাও করা। এগুলো তারেক রহমানের অত্যন্ত জরুরি। তিনি এমনকি বাংলাদেশে যে রেফারেন্ডাম হয়ে গেছে সেটি নিয়েও তিনি কথা বলেছেন। অনেকগুলো বিষয় নিয়ে আপনারা কথা বলেছেন। যারা আপনারা বাংলায় শুনতে চান, আপনারা কিন্তু পুরো ইন্টারভিউটি ডাবিং করে, বাংলায় ডাবিং করে শুনতে পারবেন। আপনারা শুনুন। এবং মাইকেল রুবিন বলছিলেন যে পুরো আমেরিকানদের এটি জানা উচিত। এখানে আমার দর্শকরা অনেকেই প্রশ্ন করেছিলেন যে মাইকেল রুবিন তিনি আমাদের বাংলাদেশিদেরকে হেল্প করতে পারে কিনা, বাংলাদেশের বিরুদ্ধে, রাষ্ট্রের বিরুদ্ধে যে একটি চক্রান্ত হয়ে গেছে, সেই চক্রান্তের বিরুদ্ধে আমেরিকা কিভাবে বাংলাদেশের পাশে দাঁড়াতে পারে। এই প্রশ্নে তিনি বলেছেন যে বাংলাদেশিদেরকে, বিশেষ করে যারা যেসব বাংলাদেশি আমেরিকায় বসবাস করছেন, তারা তাদের এলাকার যে ইলেক্টেড অফিসিয়ালস আছে, কংগ্রেসম্যান, সেনেটর, ইভেন কি কাউন্সিল মেম্বার যারা রয়েছেন, আপনারা তাদেরকে ইমেইল করুন। তাদের ইমেইল একদম অ্যাভেলেবল। জাস্ট গুগলে গিয়ে আপনার এলাকার জিপ কোড দিবেন এবং সার্চ করবেন আপনার ইলেক্টেড অফিসিয়ালকে। তাদেরকে প্রতিনিয়ত ইমেইল করুন। প্রয়োজনে ফোন করুন। তাহলে তারা বুঝবে যে বাংলাদেশে কি ঘটেছে। এখন যারা আমেরিকায় থাকি আমরা, আমাদের কিন্তু একটি আ আমরা যখন বাংলাদেশ ইস্যুতে কথা বলি, তখন আমরা বলি যে, "দেখো আমাদের পরিবার, পরিজন, বন্ধু-বান্ধব সব আমাদের বাংলাদেশে। ফলে তাদের ভালো-মন্দ আমাদের জীবনকে প্রভাবিত করে।" আজকে বাংলাদেশ যখন এরকম একটা বিশৃঙ্খলা পরিস্থিতির মধ্যে পড়েছে, বিদেশে আপনারা দেখবেন প্রবাসী যারা আছে, কেউ কিন্তু শান্তিতে নেই। ফলে এই যে আমাদের দেশের উপর একটা ভয়ংকর চক্রান্ত হয়ে গেছে, এটি যদি আমেরিকায় যারা আপনারা বসবাস করছেন, আপনাদের প্রত্যেকের ইলেক্টেড অফিসিয়ালকে ইমেইল করুন। তাতে আপনার যে ডকুমেন্টেড বা লিগাল হতে হবে নট নেসেসারিলি। আপনি শুধু তাদেরকে বলুন যে আপনি তার এলাকায় বসবাস করেন এবং আপনি তার একজন ভোটার কিংবা আপনি তার এলাকার একজন বাসিন্দা। ফলে আপনি আপনার জনপ্রতিনিধিকে জানান। এগুলি খুব ভালোভাবে কাজ করে। আমি একটু বিস্তারিত ব্যাখ্যা করলাম। এতটা ব্যাখ্যা মাইকেল রুবিন করেননি। আমি যতটা আপনাদেরকে বললাম। আ ফলে কিন্তু মাইকেল রুবিন এই পরামর্শটি দিয়েছেন। এর বাইরে তিনি মনে করছেন যে তারেক রহমানের উচিত হবে খুব দ্রুতই আওয়ামী লীগকে রাজনীতির সুযোগ করে দেয়া। এখন এই পর্যন্তই আমি বিদায় নিচ্ছি। আপনারা এতক্ষণ আমার সঙ্গে যারা ছিলেন সবাই ভালো থাকুন সেই প্রত্যাশা রেখে বিদায় নিচ্ছি। সবার জন্য অনেক, অনেক শুভকামনা।